Good afternoon, everybody. It's Steve Bates and Laura Collister here for the BIA Brexit Briefing for February 2018. As you can see, we're in under 400 days to Brexit now and counting. So what we're hoping to cover today is an update on where we've got to on negotiations, the key dates, what's going on in the UK in terms of the UK government getting its position together, an important survey focused on our sector from EY, from the Department of Health, what's going on in Parliament, an update on from the EU perspective and what's going on with the EMA Relocation and next steps from us. As you know, we do these monthly. If it's your first time, you're very welcome. And this was what we covered last time. These are available via the BIA website on our YouTube channel. So they stay and live for a month if you want to share with colleagues this event if you're not able to join it live. We know we have a considerable download audience, which I'm delighted people are doing across their weekends and no doubt in the back of some other important meetings. But maybe if I can move on and give you a sense of the negotiations and where we think we are this month. Are we heading for an implementation period, sometimes also known as a transition period? I think we all hope that we are, and we think that we thought that there was moves before Christmas that would suggest that the EU and the UK governments were getting together and thought we would be heading towards that with the idea that it will be signed and sealed and organised by about March. But at the moment it isn't automatically happening, and we are continuing to enforce the importance of a transition period, implementation period with the UK government. If it does come, and we hope it will before Easter, we don't expect to see lots of detail in the formal document. Who knows? We all live and learn, but there may be documents or speeches or other materials that go around it, and we will keep you fully across those as they come. So what's happening at the moment? Well, obviously you've had UK and EU negotiators meeting earlier in the week. The EU 27 are meeting, the heads of government are meeting today, and you've also got the General Affairs Councils on Article 50 next week and towards the end of March, and we hope that the European Council meeting 22nd, 23rd of March may be when an implementation stroke transition period may be agreed. So that's what we're imagining might happen in the next month. The grand plan, of course, was for the EU summit with the final text of the withdrawal deal and the future trade relationship needs to be done by October. So March to get the transition deal done. Autumn around October, any future state deal is the thinking. We'll see whether that goes out, but at the moment we're pressing get a transition period, make sure it's done, and that's the most important thing this month. The UK government did put out a document called Draft Text for Discussion on the Implementation Period. It's only three sides, Laura, that document. Lots of documents. We went through it, came out yesterday, and there are some thinkings here. So this is the UK's approach to how it wants to see or how it imagines a implementation period, a transition period may operate. We've pulled out here some of the bits that we thought might be relevant to us, in a sense, looking at it through the lens of medicines regulation. And this is, of course, the UK's suggestion to the negotiation. During the period, experts designated by the UK may attend meetings or parts of meetings of the committees of EU meetings, essentially, where member states and experts take part. They say basically they want to be able to be in meetings. We're thinking that this could be applied in reference to the MHRA, perhaps at the EMA, but we don't know. So I'm sharing it with you. I haven't yet got a full interpretation of what this means. The argument being that the UK will need to be there for effective operation and application of union law for the purposes of the period. So we think that this is a sort of status quo ask from the UK. Although, as interesting to see point 5, during the period, UK shall not act as a leading authority for risk assessments, examinations, approvals and authorisation procedures provided for in any union law. So that's one to watch. And if we get any further interpretation on this, we will share it with you. So what's going on in the UK, apart from there being the standard merry-go-round in the United Kingdom Independence Party as to who may be the leader. I think this is how I've explained it to myself. The UK government's trying to agree its own position on Brexit, and they're using a selection of speeches from leading figures in the government to do that. They are taking intervention from backbenchers. There's voices lobbying them from left and right. They've held a special cabinet summit this week to agree. And the result of all of that is that the Prime Minister is expected to do another speech laying out her position on Brexit next week, we think probably Friday. And after all that, that will then become the basis for which the UK sallies forth to negotiate with Brussels. So a lot of what follows is the sort of the ins and outs and ups and downs of the UK divining its way theologically to a position on Brexit. And we're going to give you our best guess as to what this means. If it's a bit contradictory, I think that it is because some of the things that we're hearing from various bits of government are contradictory. It's a bit like a process of everybody parading their best to get their positions together, and we'll try and piece it together for you in the next few minutes. So the Prime Minister made a speech at a security conference last weekend, and she talked about European Court of Justice jurisdiction with regard to the Europol and the European arrest warrant, and she said. So, for example, when participating in EU agencies, the UK will respect the remit of the European Court of Justice. You could read that as being applied to other agencies, not simply the Europol and European arrest warrant, which would probably make it easy for continued alignment with the European Medicines Agency. Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, did a press conference at the same conference, and I think. Laura's found an interesting line here from her on a bespoke deal. It's not necessarily the case that a situation that is neither already known nor a classic free trade deal, that this situation is cherry picking. So is there some movement from the EU side about thinking about new ways through, and did she pick that idea up from talking to the Prime Minister? I don't know, but interesting point. Theresa May has obviously also been to China this month, with a delegation of business leaders, including some life sciences deals that were done and we've celebrated, and she's prepping for her speech next week. The Minister for Exiting the EU, David Davis, gave another interesting speech in Austria about standards and regulation, where it felt like he was an advocate for standards and regulation, which was interesting given his usual free market takes down the years. But I thought, again, it's quite interesting here, made points around patients. While we've been a member of the European Union, the UK has been instrumental in the design of its rules, ensuring patients are safe and have access to the best public health protection. We start from a position of total alignment, and then, made a case in using the car industry as an example about one series of approvals in one country to show that it meets required regulatory standards, and then talked about mutual recognition agreements. So this was an interesting intervention into the debate, and these are some of the bits that we thought were interesting from that speech. Boris Johnson gave a speech on Valentine's Day where he talked about, touched on our sector, some sectors like AI or robotics or bulk data or bioscience where we excel and where we may want to do things differently. Freed from EU regimes, we will not only be able to spend some of our Brexit bonus on the NHS, but as we develop new stem cell technology, in which this country has long been in the lead, it may be that we need a new regulatory framework, scrupulous and moral, but not afraid of the new. So, as you can see, there's a range of opinions which have differing takes on the key things that we've been asking for as part of the beauty parade. I think it's fair to say that I've yet to find in BIA membership anybody advocating for the position that Boris Johnson advocates here. Jeremy Corbyn is due to speak on Monday to clarify Labour's policy. In a sense, the shadow team have been shadowing this process, and we may get some interesting developments there next week with a Labour position also hardening up, which will be important when we get to Parliament in the coming weeks, as we'll come on to. Another another serious intervention was a letter from a European research group. 60 Conservative backbench MPs have written to the Prime Minister. Their contribution, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Priti Patel, Ian Duncan Smith, David Jones and others, have called for full regulatory autonomy. They say that we should ask to be able to change our laws and rules on exiting the EU, and we should never be a rule taker. We should only accept the implementation period if the deal is fully negotiated, and that that phase is governed only by WTO principles. So this is quite what we call a hard Brexit position, signed by a significant number of MPs, which has also contributed to the debate. And I imagine the Prime Minister had this in her back pocket as she took a Brexit War Cabinet away day in Chequers yesterday and the day before, where they all sat down and had a good lunch, I think, and a good discussion. But where that ends up, I think we'll see either in the Sunday papers, perhaps on the news tonight, or more likely formally in the resulting in the Prime Minister's speech next week. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Laura, who's going to take you through an important development in Parliament, where there have been some changes to the trade bill.
So I'm going to kick off by talking about the customs union. So the trade bill is working its way through Parliament at the moment, and yesterday Remainer MP Anna Seabury tabled an amendment which is basically seeking for the UK to stay in the customs union. She's got quite a lot of people supporting that amendment. This is the group that I think last month we talked about as the European Parliament all-party parliamentary group, who have been doing a lot of advocacy around remaining in the UK or remaining in the EU and remaining in a customs union. So that will lead to an interesting debate in Parliament as government tries to defeat that amendment, which has got quite a lot of support. And
we think, Laura, that could be in the next couple of weeks?
Yes.
So in a sense, we've got the Prime Minister looking to set out her position, we hope, of clarity, perhaps as early as next Friday. But then pretty soon after that, there'll be a discussion on a key aspect, which is could the UK stay in the customs union as a result of this amendment, probably the week after. So it will be interesting to see whether there's alignment between the Prime Minister's position and what goes to Parliament, or whether that position doesn't last a week as it is defeated in Parliament. And I think that's why Labour is particularly important at this stage. If Jeremy Corbyn sees the opportunity, perhaps a Labour Party united around a stay in the customs union position, and enough Conservative backbenchers defy the whip, this could be a tricky amendment which may tie the hands of the Prime Minister with regard to Brexit.
Yeah. And sort of earlier on this month, there was lots of discussion about customs union in the paper after the CBI put out a report about a customs union, not the customs union. It was widely reported in some of the papers and as staying in the customs union. And there's a tweet from Boris where he thought they were calling to stay in customs union. I think CBI are still seeking to push the position that the UK should seek a customs union based on evidence as opposed to politics. Institute of Directors have come out with a similar report, which is basically seeking a bit of a customs union for certain sectors. But government, as we were saying, has ruled out customs union membership. Jeremy Corbyn has previously said, he said in January that the UK can't stay in the single market. But as Steve was just saying earlier this week, the Labour Party Brexit team talked about what their policy will be, and there'll be more clarity and certainty on Monday from Labour about where their position is on that. Also, in terms of Parliament, yesterday the Health and the Science and Technology Select Committee held a summit focusing on Brexit. First time they'd done this, it was out of Parliament and had panels and an audience of about 40 people, but still counted as a select committee meeting, and all contributions will be noted and kept as part of their official report. Most Interesting, well, key bit was former Life Sciences Minister George Freeman stating that the UK should seek regulatory divergence from Europe in order to accelerate commercialisation of scientific research globally following Brexit. Though he did say it shouldn't be a cliff edge divergence, he did say that the UK could do work better on its own on regulation, and he talked about how with clinical trials could be done 6 to 7 years quicker in the UK by working with the NHS and using data.
Laura, I think I certainly had a raised eyebrow at George's interventions yesterday. It's some distance from the clear position that we've advocated, and also it shows that George himself has gone on a journey since heading up Life Sciences for Remain, as many of us campaigned with him on, feels like a long time ago, but only 18 months ago.
Yeah. So I've been looking back at some of the things we've said over the last year around regulation, regulatory alignment. And I think the clearest thing from government was when Jeremy Hunt and Greg Clark put a letter saying that they would seek regulatory cooperation. And the industry's representatives on the Ministerial Industry Strategy Group the next day published a letter which said, we very much welcome that approach, which we believe would be in the best interest for business and patients European-wide. I think that's probably
our position.
Still true. Other key thing from yesterday is Wellcome Trust launched a report at the summit focusing on EU UK research partnerships. Lots of discussion at the summit, and then also in their report around movement of researchers. So they're seeking full research and mobility within the EA and the UK. Other speakers at the event were talking about how there needs to be freedom of movement for researchers. There were some suggestions that maybe the cap on Tier 2 visas should be lifted at the moment as it's currently being hit. So lots and lots of discussion around people. There was a regulatory section which covered all sectors. So,
Laura, I think that there was quite a useful document published by Wellcome yesterday, and we should make sure that we bring it in on our website as useful pages for our Brexit pages if people want to see the detail of that report.
Yeah, I can do that. Also in the world of health select committees is the Health Select Committee, which Steve gave evidence to in December. They're on their Brexit medicines, medical devices and substance of human origin inquiry, looking at supply and then the impact of patients. So Chair Sarah Wollaston has written to Jeremy Hunt, focusing on a number of different issues, mostly around certainty and the need for transition arrangements as soon as possible, and potential around disruption of supply of medical products, and that companies are planning for a worst case scenario despite costs because of the lack of certainty. She also went on to talk about how services shouldn't be made to transition twice, so the implementation period needs to maintain the current regulatory status quo, and she went on to talk about the impact of on other sectors. The failure to reach agreement on other sectors on medicines, devices and substance could put patient care at risk.
So I think it was a really helpful intervention, and I think it shows that the impact of the evidence, written evidence, joint written evidence we gave with the ABPI and others has landed effectively with the Select Committee with its ears open, and great that they're lending their weight with a letter to the Secretary of State on some of the issues that that we've been working hard on, and Laura, you've particularly been working hard on.
So the Health Committee will write a report leading out of its inquiry, but these reports take time, so we won't expect it for another month to 6 weeks. So I think they were very aware that there's a lot of pressure quite imminent on issues around supply medicines, which might be one of the reasons why they did this letter. Moving on, just very quick one here to highlight that Department of Ethics in the EU have published plans around movement of people for residents from Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway to give them similar rights as those that they've previously laid out for people from EU member states, and we covered in the last couple of webinars. Just moving on to EY supply chain work, I think been quite a bit of discussion about this because the ministers talked about it in the select committee towards the end of this year, or end of last year, started this year, before it had been officially launched. So EY have been appointed by Department of Health to look at the impact of Brexit on the supply of medicines to the UK patients. No focus on price or cost. It is really around looking at where there might be issues day one post-Brexit. A number of other work streams, as obviously this is just part of all their work. So they're looking at R&D, clinical trials, workforce and medical devices. There's 5 areas that they're looking. So they've mapped the supply chain. They're asking how suppliers are preparing themselves. And this is a survey which has gone out from EY via trade associations. So ABPI have circulated all their members. We've circulated it to members, and other trade associations have circulated it to their members. After they get the results of that, they're looking at identifying individual products using MHRA and EMA data, and then looking at supplier side in more detail. So working with, depending on the results of the surveys, with those companies that are flagging potential issues, and then also just making sure that they do a cross-section of all companies that have responded to the work. And then they are intending from April to do final reporting recommendations to government. So obviously this is Department of Health, very focused on getting medicines to the NHS. We've put a couple of pictures from KFC. I thought it was very good when, well, quite apt when they said they've got the chicken, they've got the restaurants, they just have issues getting them together. So I'm assuming that's what EY are working for the NHS post-Brexit. Then I've got 2 quick slides here about some organisations you might have seen in the press. So the Brainy Britons. This is the coalition of academics who've launched a site called Briefings for Brexit, where they wanted to make the positive case for leaving the EU and the need for a good deal. This was, I think, to show that there's like brainy people back Brexit as well at the most basic level. It is mostly lawyers, academics and philosophers. We haven't seen any scientists on it.
Yeah. Certainly no life scientists.
From the other side, we might also have seen discussion around George Soros and his financing of a campaign to remain in the EU. This is the Best for Britain campaign. They want to advocate to stay in the EU, so not a soft Brexit, it's a remain, and they are anticipating doing an advertising campaign coming up.
Great stuff. Thanks, Laura. I'll just pop us across the channel to look at some of the developments that have happened in the EU 27 at the moment. And I think one of the things that's prominent for our community this month is the continued discussion around the relocation of the European Medicines Agency, getting caught into a few things. So Italy and Milan have appealed to the European Court of Justice to cancel the relocation of the EMA. Amsterdam is building its new building, but they won't be ready for March 2019, so they have to go staff will have to go into temporary accommodation. And essentially, there's an ongoing row. The reason I put this in is not only is that as you can see, there may be processes within the European Union or the European Parliament which may make it more difficult for the EMA to deliver against what is already an ambitious plan, and we're watching this fairly carefully. I sort of thought this would be a storm in a teacup and it would be been and come and gone in a week or two. It doesn't feel like that at the moment. It feels like there's more momentum behind having another look at the process or re-examining the decision or how it was done. although who knows where it will be after Italian elections. So I think for us it's a watch closely, and we'll see in the coming weeks statements from the heads of medicines agency who are meeting in Lisbon next week, and perhaps an ongoing discussion of this within European institutions. If we think it leads to any substantive change, we will of course immediately share that with you. We've also, as you know, we work closely with our trade association colleagues in Brussels, and this week there was a patient organisations, industry and healthcare discussion in Brussels involving the European Patients Forum with Europa Bio and FPIA, which was well regarded and shows the continuing operations of this of our coalitions on both sides of the channel. German government, this is an interesting one. Looks like there could be ongoing ruminations as to whether the Grand Coalition can get together, partly as a result of what the Social Democratic Party in Germany does. So again, we're watching that. Perhaps it means that things are not that easy in Germany, and we'll keep an eye on that as to whether that has implications for Brexit 4 negotiating process.
Just a short update, just talking about what we're working on at the moment. So working with MHRA and government on post-Brexit models for regulation. So obviously we've been working at this for a long time. This has been sort of adapted as some of the external politics have changed and become clearer, and we're continuing to push in that area around alignment and cooperation. We're looking as sort of some of the more fallback positions, for instance, mutual recognition, and highlighting how things such as that could work with government. And we're doing trade policy work with government, especially around FTAs and WTO. They are arranging a life sciences FTA discussion on the US in a few weeks' time. We're also seeking clarification from government on the implementation policy position. So going back to the document that Steve highlighted right at the start. In terms of engagement, the steering group is next Thursday. This is the overall governance structure for our Brexit work, which was established all the way back in July 2016 by George Freeman when he was Life Sciences Minister. We continue to push for an implementation period and regulatory alignment through cooperation. Brexit Health Alliance work is continuing, and there's a paper coming out shortly around research. And of course, we're going to be carrying on doing our webinars.
Thanks, Laura. So if you're still with us, I hope that you can see this month the government's working out its Brexit position through its speeches process. The opposition is working out its Brexit position, but neither of which we formally know yet. But we expect big speeches next week. There's a parliamentary flashpoint coming on the customs union in a couple of weeks. While over in Brussels, the informal heads of government are meeting today. I think they're probably scratching their heads, wondering what Britain actually wants. We continue to push for the best solutions for patients in the sector. In a sense, our position has been clear for many, many months, and we continue to advocate the position as agreed by all of the members. And this is remains a crucial time in the lead up to the implementation period. I hope with that we've been able to give you some form of useful update in half an hour or so. Let's see what questions you've got. Does George Freeman know that large pharma would focus on the UK with a change to regulation? I guess they would still concentrate on the larger markets first. So I see no benefits in regulatory divergence in terms of timelines for commercialisation. Colin, yep, you're in line with the thinking of the vast majority of voices I hear in membership, and that's yeah. I wasn't able to discern from George's intervention whether he'd been influenced by speaking to people in industry. There wasn't any evidence that was where he got to the position from. People are asking about where to get the EY survey, Laura. What's the best way to do that?
I can send it to them.
Okay, so we can make sure, drop Laura an email if you're struggling to find the link to the EY survey. I think it is most important for people who've got and companies that have got products on the market and are actually selling into the NHS. It's that's really the focus that I think the Department of Health are focusing on. So yeah, happy to do that. When could we expect MHRA guidance for the transfer of CP licenses into MHRA national licenses? Do we know in terms of could we expect that CP? Sebastian, I don't know the exact answer to that. I know that these are the types of discussions that that the MHRA have been trying to help people with. I think it's difficult for them to know exactly their position at the moment with regard to this. I point you to the statement on their website from January, which is the most public recent public position on what they're expecting people to do and the flexibility which they hope to operate. I think it's a watch this space. We may see some more public utterance from the MHRA in the coming weeks, but I think it's difficult for me to give you that specific answer on this. Unless there's anything else, I'm suggesting that we could close it fairly soon. Thanks for the comments. If you've enjoyed this, a couple of things that we're doing at the BIA that I'd point you in the direction of. In a couple of Mondays' time, we have an inaugural Chief Medical Officer Summit at the Wellcome Collection in London. The idea here is to get people who are managing medical affairs functions with limited resources, usually in smaller companies, together. We've been particularly asked by membership to put this together to, in a sense, get a community together of people who are not maybe used to work or who are CMOs in smaller companies. And we hope that this will help address issues of raising capital, how to do partnerships with big pharma, what the skills are you need to be a CMO if you've not got thousands of support functions around you, and creating a network to share ideas, solutions and support. I know there's many on this call who are experts in regulation. You may know people who you consult to who would benefit from this, or you may benefit from it yourself. I would encourage you to get those people to register. The link is here and it's on our website. It looks like it's going to be some great panels and a great event. I know also the agenda for the BIA MHRA Conference is now published, and the website is open for the BIA MHRA Conference. We'll be having it on the 5th of July, joint conference with the regulators. They will, at that stage, be able to answer your questions as to where we are going. And I would encourage you to register if you've got detailed questions. It's always a good day. We've got a great lineup of senior representation, both from the regulators and industry about this. We will talk about Brexit, continuity planning, working together on accelerated access, drug device combinations and real world evidence. So some great panels. It's always a good day. Do register now and do please share with people who you think might benefit from this. We're at 30 Euston Square and it will promises to be an excellent day. So please mark your diaries and even better, register and get in soon. As you can see, it's just one of many upcoming BIA events, including various bits this month. I've talked about the Medical Officer Summit. You may be interested in the Women in Biotech Networking Evening. If you're in Cambridge, where we've got a breakfast on the 22nd of March. The CEO and Investor Forum is also up on our website, and the early bird rate closes next week for that. So if you want to make sure you benefit from that, then please do take advantage of that this very week. And I've mentioned the BIA MHRA Conference. If you're not a member and you would like to join, Jane Wall would be delighted to hear from you. I'm always delighted to hear from you, and I know that we can then share with you not only what we do in terms of Brexit, but many of the other benefits of membership that the BIA can bring. Thank you. We'll be back for another briefing on Friday the 23rd of March, by which I hope we'll have the bones of the UK government's position, the Labour Party's position, and perhaps knowledge of whether we're getting a transition. But until then, goodbye and enjoy the weekend.